All right, good morning. I tried. All right, good morning. It's hard to start off a class like this. Good morning. We're going to look at a new vice today, but we are. So our Sunday morning class for the next 3 or 4 weeks now, it's taking a look at what we call the glittering vices or the 7 deadly sins, the capital vices, whatever that is, however you want to word those. And there are 7 ones, and we're trying to look at them, see how to avoid them, and then what virtues to cultivate on the other side to move us away from those, right? Into the life of vice or the life of virtue. And so we've talked about these. I'm pretty sure I've still got these on. Yep, there we go. So we have what are called the virtues, the 7 major virtues, theological and cardinal virtues, and we've talked about that. Won't go into that anymore. And then the capital vices, and so we had vainglory and envy and sloth and avarice, which we've covered those. And today's, if we're all ready for it, is wrath, which is always a fun one because nobody ever struggles with this one, right? So, wrath. And this definition comes from Henry Fairley, and I like this one, by the way, and there's a lot to it, is the love of justice. Okay? So, justice is one of the cardinal virtues. The love of justice perverted into the desire for revenge and for the injury of someone else. And I like this little tag that he's got at the end of it, that justice is the proclaimed motive for every manifestation of wrath. Right? And there's a lot to that. Right? We're gonna talk about that as we make our way through. All right. So what I want to do though is I want to talk about this, what wrath is and what it's not. Wrath is not just anger, but it certainly starts there. Okay, so let's talk about anger for a minute. There are two major views on anger as far as how Christians ought to interact with anger. How about that? One is, and he summed up by, I believe it's Thomas Aquinas, who says that anger is an emotion given to us by God that we recognize and we react to injustice in the world. Okay, which makes some sense. It's something that's given to us. It's an emotion of dealing with injustices of the world. And so there's a couple of things. I think I have these both up there. I've got them backwards. Sorry, but I can think of times when Jesus is angry, and Aquinas would point to this kind of thing. So this is Mark chapter 3, and we're fairly familiar with this, I hope. Jesus goes into the synagogue, and a man with a withered hand, and they, which seems to be the Jewish leadership, watch to see what he's going to do. And he says to the man with the withered hand, "Come here." And then he looks at them, he says, "Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or to kill?" But they were silent. And he looked around at them with anger, grieved the hardness of their heart, and then told the man, "Stretch out your hand." There's one. Jesus is angry. Certainly seems that way. Now, I don't think that it's ever said in this particular narrative. It certainly seems to be on display as Jesus cleanses the temple. And I doubt that you're whistling while you're doing this, right? So it seems anger might have something to do with it. Right? He begins to drive out the people who are selling and buying and selling. And this is Mark's account, and I think it's John's account. May not be, but I think it's John's account where he actually makes a whip and drives out the animals and turns over tables. Certainly seems like Jesus is angry. And so there's the Aquinas side of this, of going, anger is an emotion that's given to us by God that, that is to move us toward righting the wrongs. We see injustice. All right? On another one, sorry. On another one, and this is summed up, several people have views, not just these two guys, but early church fathers. Dallas Willard's another one who has this same kind of view, is that anger is something that we ought to get rid of, that we shouldn't have. We ought to work to get rid of. As a matter of fact, Willard, and I believe this is in the Divine Conspiracy, said that there is nothing that is done with anger or in anger that couldn't be better done without it. And that seems to make some sense along those lines too. So I look at, again, here's Jesus. You've heard that it was said, you should not murder. Whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to whoever is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Now, I haven't done a deep dive into the research on this, but this is what I understand. That there are some translations, and I can't remember which ones they are. I think the New Revised Standard's one of them, and there's another one I can't remember, that will say, whoever is angry with his brother without a cause. But I don't think without a cause is actually in the Greek to start with. Which kind of takes us back to the other, of this idea of seeking justice is always the motive for wrath. Some way of going, well, I had a reason to be angry with him. But Jesus doesn't give that here. He says, don't do it. Whoever's angry with his brother. He talks about this, talks about being reconciled. We go to Colossians chapter 3, another great one. Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you, sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these, the wrath of God is coming. In these you too once walked, when you were living in them, but now you must put them all away. Anger, wrath, malice. So it seems to me that Paul's saying you ought to get rid of that. Anybody with me? This is not the end all be all on these passages, by the way. These are just a couple. Throw in Paul from Ephesians chapter 4, talks about this same kind of thing, about this new life that you're called to in Christ, and one of them is be angry but don't sin. Well, how about keeping a foot in both camps there, Paul, right? Get rid of it or be angry. Which ones is it, right? But there's something to this. The number of times, and I've lost count of the number of times, I think it's 14 times in the book of Proverbs that anger is mentioned, and most of the time it is to stay away from it. It's 30 sometimes in Psalms. I mean, and then you think about James. We're studying James on Wednesday nights, and there's a passage in James that says that the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. So how do we deal with this stuff? So what do we do with it? How do we view anger? There's another book called The Seven Deadly Sins, written by, I think it's Tony Campolo. It's an older book that echoes the first definition that we had about wrath and seeking justice being the motive. Is that he will go through and talk about the ways that we try to rationalize our anger. And so how do we do that, right? How do we reconcile? Well, there's so many things about this. And even in this passage in Colossians about the wrath of God. And, I don't mean to be sacrilegious in any way, but of going, well, wait a minute, God can be wrathful, but I can't? And the answer to that's yes. And I think this is what I want to get to. Wrath is anger at the wrong thing. Okay? Stan. So if you didn't hear that, Stan was asking about the passage in the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus says, and anyone says, you fool is in danger of the fires of hell. It's There's more to it than this, but this is what I'm remembering off the top of my head, is that Jesus is not adding fool to the list of the words you can't say. What it is dehumanizing the other person, right? Useless, worthless, idiot, good for nothing, those kinds of things. And what he's saying is, this is the way that you dehumanize the other people around you, this is not going to lead to a good place. Okay? That make sense? Okay. Wrath. Wrath, again, anger at the wrong thing. Wrath is often anger at an injustice done to us that we perceive has been done to us. Right? Now, there's a lot to that. Sometimes there is downright bad things, injustice that happen to us. But oftentimes, it's not really a major injustice. Sometimes it's an inconvenience. The lady that wrote the book that's kind of been the basis of this, Rebecca DeYoung, talks about a road trip that she and her family were taking. They had planned this vacation and they were going to drive. I forgot where it was they were driving to, but as they made their way, they come in traffic is at a standstill. And she thinks, well, it's going to get better, but it doesn't. And it just keeps on and it keeps on. And there are people getting off the road and going the other way. And they finally come upon this and she goes, why don't these people just get out of my way? And when they got up there to the front of this to see what was actually going on, it also happened to be Easter weekend. And there was a pastor of a church walking down the middle of the road carrying a cross, reenacting this thing of Jesus's road to crucifixion. And she said one of her kids piped up and said, you just told Jesus to get out of our way because we didn't have time, right? So, but that's the same kind of thing. We get all frustrated about this, and we think this is some way the universe is zeroing in on us when it's really not. I think it's because we think a little too highly of ourselves. Is that fair? And pride, by the way, is the root of all of these. We've talked about that. See, life. And we know this, right? And we tell our kids this. I hope we tell our kids this. Life's not fair. It's not. And the truth of the matter is, we are not the ones who get to decide what's in and out. We're not the final arbiters of justice. And I think that's why we get into this idea of, wait a minute, hold it. We talk about the wrath of God, and that's okay, but my wrath is not? Yes, because God has the vision that we don't. Right? God has the vision that we don't have. Because it always seems to come back towards what's been done to me. So, two episodes that we looked at. Man, there's a big old spider. Sorry. Got it. 2 episodes that we looked at in the life of Jesus where Jesus is angry. Or at least one where it just comes right out and says he is. The other one we're pretty sure he is. What's Jesus angry about? Jesus is not angry about the treatment he receives. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I've missed something. But I think if we read through the Gospels, I don't think we find Jesus upset because people aren't treating him well. As a matter of fact, when we get to the ultimate spot where they treat him as bad as they possibly can, Jesus says what? Anybody? Father, forgive them. Right? But Jesus is not upset about the treatment that he receives. He is upset about the injustice done to someone else. In the first case, it seems to be the man with the withered hand. That they're willing to let him suffer because it's not within the rules or their rules. And Jesus says, I can't believe that you're missing the point of Sabbath for this. And so he does it. Jesus is upset and he cleans out the temple, not because of what they've said about him, but because of what it's doing to the relationship between Israel and God. That are the things that makes him angry. Right? Now, the truth of the matter is, and I'm not speaking for everybody here, but I have an idea that we all share this in some way or another. Most of the time, when I'm angry, it's not because of what's happening to somebody else. Right? Usually, it's about what I believe's happened to me. The Young's illustration of the road trip, I think, is really, really, it really hurts, okay? Because that's, okay, let me tell you a story. Friday, I was going to go meet the lovely and talented Mrs. Grisham, and we were going to go to dinner. And I get on County Road 40, and I make my way all the way over to Commonwealth, and this may mean nothing to most of you people where this is, but I noticed that we're driving about 20 miles an hour. Now, I have places to be. And I think, okay, surely they're about to turn off. And they don't. And we come to the T, and as luck would have it, they go the same direction I'm going. And I think, okay, well, they can't be going far. And then all of a sudden, then they turn the same direction I'm going to go at the very next stop sign. And I'm going, when will these idiots get out of my way? And then you look, and it's a guy pulling a trailer. He's got some appliances on it, and his back tire is almost flat. And he's just trying to get it home. And you go, I doubt seriously that he's looking in his rearview mirror and going, I'm going to make that guy late. Right? But all of a sudden it becomes all about me and whether or not we're driving as fast as I think we ought to. Now, I'm sure nobody else ever does this. Never drive 49 and go, I can't believe that this goober is in the left lane, right? But that's what we tend to get mad about. Our wrath is often, so wrath goes from anger to they need to pay. Okay, it's not just being angry. Now it is they need to be punished for what it is they've done. And so wrath is often directed at someone who did nothing to us. Sometimes our wrath gets taken out on people who had nothing to do with the situation. And I'm sure that you're better people than I am, but I know that I've done it. Anybody with me? That something has happened and it's just been that day, right? It's just been one of those days, and then somebody comes along who has nothing to do with it, who has nothing to do with the situation, and that's all it takes. And we vent it. And they get to receive what somebody else may or may not even be due. Right? It's always often directed at someone who did anything to us, and sometimes it's done to the people who are closest to us, which is really, really bad. And then the second way that this goes wrong is that our anger is directed at someone. Ephesians chapter 6. Anybody familiar with Ephesians chapter 6 as Paul gets ready to talk about the armor of God? Our fight is not with flesh and blood, he says. But it's with the other things. Sometimes it's directed at, instead of hating the injustice or the issue, we take it to the person instead. Right? We've heard this one, right? Hate the sin, but love the sinner. Until wrath gets involved. Right? And then we're going to blast them. And then back to our first definition, then we use injustice as the motivation for lashing out at them. See, you did wrong, and now we've got to fix it. It's a tough one. It is. All right. So,
Jeff,
yes.
does wrath not necessarily have to be taken a direct action against the person that you're angry with? Because if you watch much news, you see things happen to innocent people, and you say, that so-and-so needs to have such and such done.
Right.
Is that anger or is that wrath? You didn't follow up your anger with a guy.
Right. I think some of that is anger at the injustice that's gone on. Right? Like you say, if it's the innocent that's suffering, and you go, something needs to be done about this. Now, what I'm about to get to here is I kind of fall into the camp. I don't do this well. Okay, I agree with him, but I don't do this well. Of that, there's nothing done in anger that couldn't be better done without it. I think it's Willard. I'm trying to remember now because I don't have this written down. So somebody wrote it other than me about that. Is that we would think about this as punishing our kids, in anger can go over the line, right? Or just to correct them is one thing. You with me? That makes sense? But letting wrath loose. Wrath is one of those things where it seems like we're the ones who are gonna make things right. And the problem that we have with that is that we don't do well with it. And a little bit later on in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "You've heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth." We're pretty familiar with that system of justice. That system of justice was to put limits on it. Right? Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, wound for wound, stripe for stripe, I think is how that all plays out back in the law. That's so that we don't go above and beyond what was done to us. That's the reason that the law is there. It's not that you have to, right? I don't have to take that, but I can't go past it. Because we have a tendency to go past it. Anybody with me? And we can just watch as things escalate. And they do very quickly. Right? If you did that to me, I'm going to do that to you, and I'm going to do just a little bit more so you know that you did wrong doing that to me. And then they go, well, hold on, that was a little bit out of mix, so I'm going to do that to you. Okay, well then I'm going to do that to you again, plus a little more, right? I'll raise you 10, right? We're going to keep moving up until it gets worse and worse. We don't do well with that. That's one of the reasons I think maybe anger doesn't go well. I wanted to play this clip. I couldn't get it narrowed down to just this clip. And so I really struggle with whether or not I'm even going to tell you this one, but I'm going to. So I'm a big fan of the show Frasier. That's an old show now, but yeah, I love Frasier. There's an episode of Frasier where all of these things are being done to him. He seems people are rude and all kinds of stuff, and he ends up kind of standing up for himself at the coffee shop where they always go, and everybody's really happy about that. He's made a stand for decency, and he's thrown this guy out and all this stuff. And then on his radio show the next day, people are calling in talking about the ways that they have retaliated. And there's one. So I'm going, we need to slow this down so that we don't have scorpions flying through the mail like Christmas bundt cake. Somebody mailed a FedEx package full of scorpions to their neighbor, right? Because we tend to escalate things, and it just gets out of hand. And I think that's one of the reasons why we ought to at least work at getting rid of it. Right? Now, I understand, and I'm with Aquinas, that the anger at injustice is something we ought to have. Right? We ought to feel that something's not right. Our problem is, of course, that, again, the injustice seems always to be perceived against me when it comes to this particular vice, when it becomes vicious. How's that? So, I want to look at a couple of things real quick. Symptoms is what I want to talk about, and then we'll talk about the remedy. Symptoms. The truth of the matter is that it often affects the angry person more than it does the people at whom they are angry. Does that make sense? It often affects the person who has the anger far worse than it does anybody else. I've heard this said. I wish I remember who said it first. I'd like to give them credit. But this idea of hanging on to anger, right, and kind of nursing it and refusing to let it go, is a lot like this guy likened it to drinking poison and waiting for the other person to get sick. Right? That we do this, and a lot of the times the people that we're angry with don't even know it. And it makes no difference to them. Maybe it might give a difference if they did, and it just hurts us. Right? In that passage in Ephesians 4, no, I'm sorry, I'm wrong about that. A little bit further down there. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 31, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you along with all malice. Those things are all very closely related, because you have bitterness that comes along with that, which turns into contempt, which goes back to dehumanizing the other, like we talked about a little bit ago. And all of a sudden they're not a person anymore, they're an object for my destruction. Those are kind of the big things that really hit, and it just causes a lot of trouble. So I do want to talk about the remedy. And there's about 4 things here. And the remedy to this, and the virtue that we cultivate instead of it, is love. Now, this is hard. Okay, it is. And not everybody does this. And I'm going to tell you, there's some spots where I go, I'm not sure that I could. I hope so. I hope I'm getting better, and I hope I could do this. But love, we've talked about this in several spots, that love is love's an act we do. And so I have 2 examples that I want to show you about what this looks like. And I've used one. I know I've talked about one of these before, but it's been a while. And I think the year was 2006, so it's been a while. There was in West Nickel Mines, Pennsylvania, there was a shooting at a school, an Amish school. I don't remember all of the details. I remember some of them. Is that the shooter, I forgot his name, had recently suffered a loss. I think he'd actually lost his daughter. And he was incredibly angry, imagine, about that. And he went to this school, and the Amish school in West Nickel Mine, went in, locked himself in with the kids. There was a teacher who ran for help, and others responded. He let all of the boys go. He let another teacher who was pregnant, he let her go out of there, barricaded himself in. And he shot, I can't remember, I think there were 5 killed and 11 wounded before he killed himself. Horrible, horrible thing. The Amish community went and visited the widow, took food, arranged the funeral, and were all in attendance at the funeral. To demonstrate the fact that they forgive the family, his family, for what was done and the loss to theirs. That's hard. I got to tell you, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to think that would be the case. But man, that's what it looks like. And let me give you another example, and I'll tell you what, you can actually look this one up. It's long and it's longer. It's about 4 or 5 minutes long, and there's not much more said than what I'm going to say here, but you ought to watch it because it's another great example of this. It was 2018, I believe is the right year, and some of you will know the name, some of you won't, but his name was Botham Jean. Botham Jean was a student, had been a student at Harding. He had graduated. He was working as an accountant in Dallas. Police woman, Amber Geiger was her name, comes into his apartment, and if I'm not mistaken the story, believes